Was England truly destined to rule the sun-drenched lands of Aquitaine? Did a single battle, fought amidst the thunderous echoes of a forgotten empire, truly decide the fate of kings and continents? Could a prince famed for his lavish courts and reckless ambition stumble into a trap laid by shifting alliances and simmering resentments? Let's unravel this intricate tapestry of power, betrayal, and glittering excess, a story woven with the clash of steel, the scent of exotic spices, and the whispers of forgotten prophecies. The year was 1356. England, under the shrewd and calculating Edward III, was already a force to be reckoned with, a dragon flexing its wings across the European landscape. But the true architect of this burgeoning power was his son, the Black Prince Edward, Prince of Wales, a warrior celebrated for his unmatched skill and, let's be honest, a frankly alarming penchant for extravagance. He just returned from a grueling campaign in Scotland, a brutal winter conquest that had left the nation reeling, and now a new, far grander scheme was brewing: Aquitaine. Imagine, if you will, a landscape of rolling vineyards, sun-baked stone castles, and the constant murmur of French voices, a region steeped in history, fiercely independent and utterly unwilling to relinquish its freedom. John II, the French king, wasn't exactly thrilled about this prospect. He'd recently crushed a rebellious uprising in Maine and Anjou, and his bridge over the Loire at Angers. Let's just say it was strategically dismantled. A rather dramatic way to throw a wrench in the English plans, wouldn't you agree? Edward, ever the pragmatist, wasn't about to let a little bridge thwart his ambitions. Lancaster, the English commander, swiftly moved to secure Maine and Anjou, effectively turning them into fortified outposts, a clever, if somewhat irritating, tactic. Meanwhile, the Black Prince's army, a motley crew of English knights, Gascon mercenaries, and a surprisingly large contingent of Scottish men-at-arms, thanks to Lancaster's Scottish connections, began a remarkable march. 32 days, 320 miles, a testament to their endurance and a clear signal to the French that this wasn't going to be a brief skirmish. John II, however, wasn't one to be intimidated. He assembled a massive army, dwarfing the English force, and promptly set about trying to provoke a decisive battle. Enter Cardinal Talleyrand of Perigord, a man whose diplomatic skills were, shall we say, less than stellar. He attempted to broker a truce, but his efforts were met with stony silence. The Black Prince, a man known for his strategic brilliance, seemed to sense the French were playing for time, deliberately stalling for resources. He ordered the withdrawal of his baggage train, a calculated move designed to lure the French into a trap, and lure them he did. As the French army, led by the dashing Marshal Arnaud d'Audreham and the equally formidable Marshal Robert de Clermont, charged towards the retreating English lines, a rain of arrows descended from above. It was a scene ripped straight from a medieval tapestry, a chaotic melee of clashing steel, desperate cries, and the sickening thud of bodies hitting the ground. The initial charges were repulsed, but the French, fueled by a desperate desire for victory, pressed their attack. Then the dauphin Charles, John II's young son, stepped into the fray. He led a frontal assault, a bold gamble that quickly backfired. The dismounted Anglo-Gascon men-at-arms, a formidable force in their own right, held their ground, engaging the French in a brutal hand-to-hand combat that lasted for 2 agonizing hours. The English, with the exception of the Black Prince himself, simply held their positions, letting the French exhaust themselves, their lines gradually crumbling under the relentless barrage of arrows. The dauphin, realizing the battle was slipping away, was hastily withdrawn from the field, perhaps on the orders of his father. But the young Duke of Orleans, ever loyal, followed close behind, dragging the entire 2nd Division of the French army with him. This left King John, isolated and vulnerable, facing the English alone. A desperate, almost theatrical, advance on foot followed. The Black Prince, cool and calculating, seized the opportunity. His forces, spearheaded by the valiant Captal de Buch, launched a daring flanking maneuver, piercing the French lines and surrounding the king. The oriflamme, the sacred banner of the French army, fell to the ground. It was a complete and utter rout. The casualties were staggering. The Duke of Bourbon, the Constable Marshal Clermont, names that echoed with the authority of the French court, lay dead on the battlefield. Thousands of noble men at arms were captured, including the Archbishop of Sens, 17 counts, 22 bannerets, and a host of other prominent figures. The victory at Poitiers wasn't just a military triumph, it was a devastating blow to French morale and a stark reminder of England's growing power. But the story didn't end there. Edward, ever the master strategist, recognized the need for a swift and decisive resolution to the Scottish conflict. He secured a treaty with Robert of Balliol, the Scottish king, effectively ending the long and bloody war. David II, the Bruce claimant, was recognized as the legitimate ruler of Scotland, but at a steep price, a massive ransom to be paid over time. Now, the challenge lay with France. The French Regency government, reeling from the defeat at Poitiers, was hesitant to offer the generous terms demanded by Edward. A draft Treaty of London proposed a staggering sum, 4 million gold écus, to secure the release of John II, along with territorial concessions that would have effectively returned England to its former glory. The French simply couldn't afford it. The stalemate dragged on, fueled by Edward's increasing demands and the French's stubborn refusal to yield. The Black Prince, meanwhile, was busy consolidating his gains in Aquitaine, establishing a lavish court at Bordeaux that was the envy of Europe. Think glittering banquets, elaborate tournaments, and a seemingly endless supply of exotic goods. It was a far cry from the austere military camps of the Scottish Highlands and a clear demonstration of the prince's ambition and his understanding of how to project power. But Aquitaine wasn't a simple conquest. It was a region steeped in tradition, fiercely independent, and resistant to English rule. The Counts of Perigord, Armagnac, and Comminges refused to recognize the Black Prince's authority, leading to a constant stream of skirmishes and border disputes. The Principality was a volatile patchwork of rival factions, a far cry from the orderly English counties. And then there were the Free Company's mercenary bands of seasoned soldiers from across Europe, eager to make a fortune on the battlefield. They had wreaked havoc in France for years, and their presence in Aquitaine posed a serious threat to the Black Prince's authority. A disastrous campaign against Castile, orchestrated by Bertrand du Guesclin, resulted in the capture of the Black Prince's brother, John of Gaunt, and a massive debt that threatened to bankrupt the English crown. Despite these setbacks, Edward refused to abandon his ambitions. He launched a second invasion of France in 1359, assembling a massive army and demanding even more territory. The Siege of Rheims, a symbolic act of defiance, ended in a humiliating retreat, followed by a disastrous march through Burgundy, where the English army was decimated by a violent storm. Finally, a treaty was negotiated at Bretigny, a compromise that secured a modest ransom for John II, a few key territories, and a recognition of Edward's claim to the French throne. But the terms were far from satisfactory, and the treaty was contingent on the transfer of territories taking place within a year. The French, ever resourceful, chipped away at the edges of the English-controlled territories, slowly eroding Edward's gains. As the years passed, the luster of the Black Prince's victories began to fade. The plague returned to England, claiming countless lives and plunging the kingdom into chaos. Edward, now a man in his 50s, issued a general pardon, addressed the abuses of the royal purveyance system, and oversaw the creation of the Principality of Aquitaine for his son, Richard. But the Principality and Richard himself never lived up to the promise of their father's legacy. The marriage prospects for the Black Prince, a man known for his extravagance and his penchant for beautiful, but often troublesome, women, remained elusive. Finally, in 1361, he married Joan of Kent, a surprise match for a man accustomed to commanding armies and ruling vast territories. Joan, a woman of striking beauty and a scandalous past, brought with her two sons, Edward of Angoulême and Richard, the future King Richard II. The marriage was a strategic alliance, a means of securing the succession and solidifying the Black Prince's claim to Aquitaine. Yet even as the Black Prince settled into his new role as a husband and stepfather, the seeds of discord were already sown. Aquitaine, a region of diverse cultures and conflicting loyalties, proved to be a constant source of tension. The Counts of Périgord, Armagnac, and Comminges continued to resist English rule, and the principality remained a volatile and unpredictable territory. The final chapter of this epic saga unfolded in 1366 when the Black Prince launched a disastrous campaign in Spain to support Pedro the Cruel, a Castilian claimant to the throne. The campaign ended in a humiliating defeat, leaving the Black Prince deeply in debt and further straining the English treasury. As Edward III aged and his ambitions waned, the dream of a unified England stretching from Scotland to the Pyrenees faded into a distant memory. The magnificent victories of the Black Prince and Edward III were slowly eclipsed by the relentless efforts of the French to reclaim their lost territories. And so the question remains, was it all worth it? Did the fleeting glory of English conquest justify the immense cost in blood and treasure? Was the ambition of a single prince destined to be swallowed by the vast and unforgiving landscape of medieval Europe? Perhaps the answer lies not in the grand sweep of history, but in the details, in the clash of steel, the scent of exotic spices, and the whispered legends of a time when England dared to dream of ruling the world.